Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to break down the recent Zenkai Cup that was hosted online by PPG. I always gotta shout them out, man, because they just have their information so readily available. Like the day after a tournament, their stuff is up. Great graphics, easy links to things. PPGEventManager.com. Definitely check them out. I'll link this down in the description so you guys can see all the deck lists for this top 16. But yeah, this is Zenkai Cup. It was online. Over 100 players from what I heard. So this is now the biggest tournament in this post-ban list / Zenkai Dash Pack format leading into the World's LCQ. So biggest tournament so far. This is the third tournament of this format won by Blue, and the second tournament won by Crimson. Crimson still seems very, very strong, even post errata. I'll definitely attest to that myself. The deck's very, very good. But yeah, we'll take a look at this meta breakdown in a moment. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. Let's just jump right on in. One more thing I want to mention about this being a Zenkai Cup. If you guys remember from Unison Warrior Cups as well as the previous Zenkai Cups, there were these deck building restrictions applied to them, but for whatever reason, these slew of Zenkai Cups, they've lifted those restrictions. There are no deck building restrictions. These are just basic, like regular Dragon Ball Super constructed tournaments. Like whatever deck you want to play, as long as it's accordance with the ban list, you can play it. So I feel like that's just important to note because some people might have confusion on whether or not these are sort of restricted formats in terms of deck building. They're not. Anyways, top 16, we are starting off with 3 Crimson, and that manages to win the event as well. Now, what's interesting is Crimson is the most topping deck in this top 16, but it's not by a crazy margin. We saw a similar thing at the European Zenkai Cup that we looked at just a couple days ago. Crimson, still the most represented, still seems very strong in terms of, you know, its ability to win the event and the last event, but it's not overbearingly representative, so I'll say it's a good thing for now. I still like Crimson as a deck. It's just a good blue mid-range deck. It can play both sides of the game, both aggressive and controlling. But at least from this top 16, it doesn't look super overbearing. And I do have to say, this top 16 has a great mix of all the colors. So I made this comment in a previous video. We might actually be at a point where all the colors are almost equally playable. I say almost because blue might just be slightly above the rest, and I don't know, maybe black is slightly below the rest. There might be an argument for green there, but green's been on the rise and black's doing fine here too. So super interested and happy to see that. But anyways, 3 Crimson. We'll look at that list in just a moment. 2 Android 16. So Jerry Lopez is not alone in this top 16. Someone else also managed to top cut with Android 16. Just your classic Arrival blue deck at this point. In this top 16, this is the only deck from the looks of it that heavily relies on Arrival. You could make comments about Pan and SS4 Gogeta, who have similar quote-unquote Arrival mechanics, but as far as pure Arrival goes, you're looking at Android 16, and it's super cool to see that this deck is still playable. It's the only one from, I think it was Battle Evolution Booster, the only leader out of that was you know, rather playable. So cool to see that leader still doing some things here and there. And then for the other blue-green deck of choice, we have Gamma still doing very well here. Gamma's been a consistent representative these past 3 tournaments, and nothing really has changed there. Managed to take second place in this event. And then we do have 2 Reboot Beerus. So I am still happy to see that Reboot Beerus is not overly dominant here. And again, I think that's due in combination to things like aggro decks like Kai, hand control decks like Cell, and possibly Majin Vegeta being a combination of both aggro and hand control. We'll take a look at that list in this video as well. So that's really good. And then for singletons, we have 1 SS4 Gogeta and 1 Pan being our sole red representatives. Red has definitely stepped down a notch, and once again we go another week without seeing any Sin Shenron in representation. Maybe that deck is just finally dead, but we'll definitely keep an eye on that going forward. We do have the Majin Vegeta. Very excited to see that list. We have the Cell reboot, the Kid Goku reboot being our only yellow representative. One of my favorite decks, so I'm happy to see it here. And then Supreme Kai of Time, which is my pick for the current best black deck in the format. The support it's got recently is insane. Now let's take a look at some of the highest placing lists. We will start with the first place Crimson list. A clean 50, which I do actually appreciate. That's a very consistent build right there. So let's go through it. Going through the top row very quickly, 3 being perfectly fine. 3 being is actually interesting to point out here because if red is seeing a dip in popularity, Crimson can get to a point where it sacrifices a little bit on its aggro matchup, meaning you can cut things like Bean, you can maybe cut like a Beerus Destroys if you want to, which, taking a quick look, this list is only playing 1 Beerus Destroy. That's very interesting. But yeah, if aggro is going to be less prevalent in the format, you can make some concessions and play less defensive and maybe play more mid-rangey offensive tools because you want to be able to beat decks like Beerus, of course. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Going through this top row seems pretty standard so far. I'm just looking for anything that kind of stands out. So here we go. We have 3 copies of Sand Instincts, which is a really good tech for best of 1 because you never know when you might pair up against some random hand control deck. We all know how well hand control does into blue, so it's pretty good to see some anti-hand control there. Of course, you could also treat Smoke Dragon as like Sand Instincts as well, but Sand Instincts has a synergy of being a sand, which works with the Unawakened Leader. So that's really good. And then Machika Burrow. This is a card that we've been talking about here on the channel to try and counter things like SS4 Vegeta Rise of the Super Warrior. You can, of course, use it against the Cell Reboot matchup to call their boss monster. Any game-ending boss monster can get stunned a full turn by Machika Burrow, which is really solid. And then we have a super combo split of 3 Zeno, 1 Zeno, 3 Vegeta. I like the 2-2 split, but I mean, just playing some number of Zeno, I think feels correct. It just lends to that mid-rangey capability of the deck to still put on a lot of offensive pressure via cards like UI Kamehameha and Unbreakable Goku, but have that defensive capability of Zeno. Feels really good. And then another interesting choice is 2 copies of Goku Fusion Synergy. When this card attacks, take a life, gains 10k, and critical. We saw my teammate Marcus Nationals playing the sort of antithesis to this, which is the 1-drop Vegeta Double Striker, Savior of the Future. This is the 1-drop crit, and this is resource denial, so not as much damage, but you also don't give your opponent a card to hand. There's a trade-off there. Seems pretty solid. Let's take a look at Majin Vegeta, which again I think took 3rd place here. So this is obviously a deck that I'm less familiar with. Of course, I know the general premise of what it does, but as for like what every single card does exactly, I'd have to be refreshed on a little bit. Like, for example, what does this 1-drop Vegeta do? Servant, activate main, pay 2 green. If your leader is mono green, you have 3 or more energy. Choose 1 Prince of Destruction Vegeta Prideful Warrior in your hand and play on top of this card in active mode. So you're essentially cheating out your quote-unquote boss monster for 1 less energy, which seems alright, I guess. This is a Deflect Triple Striker Servant, so it's actually gonna hit for 30k, and then if your leader's mono green, choose an opponent's unison and remove 3 markers from it. So this was unison removal before it was cool, so that's pretty nice here. Are we actually playing other form of unison removal? We are. We're playing 1 copy of Latent Power Unleashed. Is this build playing the Fated Rivals? We were playing Goku Fated Rivals. Are we playing Piccolo in this build? It does not appear that we are playing Piccolo. That's okay. You've got obviously this card as well as the Latent Power Unleashed to deal with markers. Piccolo is nice for a little bit of hand control, but does this deck do anything else in the form of hand control? Doesn't really appear to be. So this just does seem like a green aggro deck, which is not something we see every day, but it is still cool to see nonetheless. And this is actually a really strong card. Prince of Destruction Vegeta Life and Death. This restands if your opponent negates the attack, and it is playable from the bottom of your deck thanks to your leader's Awaken ability. You have various effects that put it in the bottom of your deck. Obviously, Overlord and Servant do it, but also your Great Saiyaman Super combo is capable of doing that. Now, this is a very interesting unison choice. We have King Piccolo, Dimensional Conqueror. So this guy has an ability to cheat himself out. If your leader's mono green, your opponent has 7 or more cards in hand. You can play her for 1 with a marker on it. Now, that's a pretty easy condition to meet because you're playing a leader that has base double strike. So the first 2 damage going to their hand, they're going to have more than 7 cards most likely. The +1 I have to refamiliarize myself with. Choose 1 card in your hand, place it under this card. You and your opponent draw 1 card, then you choose up to 1 green battle card with original energy cost of 1 in your hand and play it. At the end of the turn, your opponent chooses 1 card in their hand and places it at the bottom of their deck up to 1 card. So that is a super interesting position to be in because we just talked about Majin Defiance making this thing cost 1 less, right? But if you're playing it for free off of this specific unison, it now costs 2, which makes this card a lot more interesting. But you're giving your opponent draw power, which is, that's a really risky trade-off. I mean, obviously it worked for this player here in this tournament. I'd be super interested to know more about how this worked out. If you're watching this video, whoever played this deck, let's take a look who played this deck real quick. If you're watching this video, Thomas, reach out to me. I would love to do a deck profile because this list seems super, super interesting. Definitely reach out. Let's take a look at Pan here, our highest placing red deck over SS4 Gogeta, which is very interesting. A lot of people very much like Pan, so they'll be happy to see that. As far as going through here, Beer Super Combo I think has become the gold standard for Pan. It just doesn't care about what life total you're at. You can awaken at 6 and still Super Combo. Feels pretty good there. You do miss out on the searches of Pan United Emotion, but you take what you can get. Topo, always strong in Pan because it floodgates your opponent and is able to draw a card, so that discard cost is basically no longer a cost. And then another good addition is the Goku Vegeta Trunks triple combination, put on top of any sand, so any of your 1-drops that may not be up to the power threshold that your leader wants. And then this thing is also a nice piece of removal and a solid piece of aggression. We are also playing Dark Rejuvenator Toa. This is able to restand any battle card that costs 2 or less, and that works in tandem with our Defender of Life. Once you bump that up to about 40k, I think this deck can get it up to. That's a really big amount of pressure, which is kind of cool. And throughout the rest of this, we see one counter for any of the dormants or any of the free D magics. We have Royal Evolution to restand our leader for more swings. A lot of interesting tech in this, and I do again like that this is a 50 card list. Very, very consistent. And then we come to Jared Lopez's Android 16 list. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this deck at all. I will point out some things that I notice. There is the classic combo of Android 16 Stalwart Defender, which gets you search power or removal, and then you crack that into Deity's Wrath. That's going to help you out grind any of your slower matchups, the blues and the yellows namely. And then we have a new addition, which is Android 17 Defending Friends, another Android card the deck is capable of playing. If your leader's blue and you have a Z leader or 3 or more Z energy or a Z battle card in play, this deck will typically always have the Z energy necessary. Your opponent will have to bottom deck a card from their hand if they want to keep attacking for the turn. And yeah, this deck is super good at making Z energy, so that's no surprise there. Another clean 50 cards, man. Maybe we're moving to a point where Dragon Ball Super goes back to 50 cards because games are running just a little bit quicker. But with things like Beerus and Crimson in the format, I mean, you could of course make arguments either way. Going on to Reboot Beerus. Taking a look through this, I looked at this a moment ago actually, and this actually looks a bit more like a Crimson deck, like almost like a ramp Crimson deck, because it's very combo centric. Of course, you have the Zenos, you have the Sensu Beans, you have the Beerus Destroys, and we're pretty light on floodgates in this build, right? We're looking through this, we're not seeing any Ready to Rumbles, we're not seeing any Oceanus, any Gohan Baby's Minion. We do see a lot of combo power though. We do see Defending Friends, which is just a 1 cost, so you're not investing too much into that and you're still punishing your opponent. So yeah, more combo centric. Maybe floodgates just aren't the way anymore, because even though things have been hit in red that answer floodgates, it still seems like they're just not the way to go, because you can invest less energy and still maintain a high hand size with things like Realm of the Gods Beerus. And then the highest placing SS4 Gogeta list, the only topping SS4 Gogeta list. This is a good one to look at, because for anyone who is still a diehard red player, it seems like you have 2 options. You have the option of Pan, which was higher placing than this, but if you want to see what a new updated SS4 Gogeta list looks like, here is your guy. So we're still playing the Unison, of course. Even though Smoke is a card, this Unison gets you so much value just immediately as it's played. You kind of don't care if it gets smoked. I mean, of course, you prefer it to not get smoked, but again, it gets you such immediate value on play that you're still going to dedicate 2 energy to it. It's not really that much of a big deal. We are going with the SS4 Vegito Unison. I personally think with this much blue in the format, you may want to consider playing a SSB Vegeta SCR, that one that wipes the board, kills the Unison, makes them burn a life. It is very good against Boo Unison. Sometimes this deck can struggle heavily against Boo Unison from my experience, but still, I mean, a free 40k quad strike can't go wrong there. Going along all of our standard Goku and Vegeta stuff, very interesting super combo choice. I've seen a lot of people not really want to go into Raditz super combo because you do awaken and go to 6 life. However, I think your life control in a deck like this is perfectly acceptable to the point where you should probably just play Raditz. It's cool this one is searchable as well, because unlike Beerus, that's not searchable, and this is searchable. Beerus might just be slightly better via its effect. But I think with the combination of Vegeta surrounding the impossible and testing the opposition, I would just play Raditz. And this list plays a low amount of testing the ops, which yeah, I mean, I would lean a little more heavily into. You do have the after images as well, so that's another way to get down to 4 life. I just think Raditz is a really solid card for a deck like this that does run a fair amount of uncomboables, so you might want to just put those to the bottom and then redraw some new cards, but to each their own. We are taking the one of Galactic Explorers, which I don't love. I was just talking about how Smoke Dragon's in the format, and like, this is a card that relies on a Unison that is very susceptible to smoke, so that's a little bit risky, but I mean, it can work out. It's if you want to maybe spend less energy than on, let's say, a Gogeta Triumphant together. And then for our Floodgate answer, we have Omen of Awakening. You've got options in a deck like this. You got Omen of Awakening, you got Beerus Ball. This list seems like it wants to stay at a bit of a higher life total, so with that in mind, Omen makes sense, but Omen will also get you lower in life because you have the crit of life, which will also turn on your Raditz super combo, so maybe that's a big brain move there. But anyways, that is all the lists I wanted to look at in this video. Again, I'll link this PPG event management site down in the description so you guys can check out all the lists you want to look at. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.